Well, welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. Today, the gag by a former Google employee says he has documented proof that the tech giant blacklisted conservative and Christian websites. What this shocking revelation could mean in the 2020 election. Heather Sells brings us the alarm on this appalling story.
Former Google employee Zachary Voorhees told the investigative organization Project Veritas that he has proof showing Google actively shuts out conservative and Christian voices. Voorhees says that while working at Google, he found documents revealing that it blacklists conservative websites like Glenn Beck's and Rush Limbaugh's, as well as Christian sites.
They were intending to sculpt the information landscape so that they could create their own version of what was objectively true.
Radio host Glenn Beck tells CBN News he's talking to Google about being blacklisted and wants to get the warning out.
And I think it's really more of a depersonalizing people. You're just disappearing. It's very reminiscent of China.
Voorhees says he has close to 1,000 documents that show this manipulation, and he's delivered them to the Antitrust Division at the Department of Justice. CBN requested more information from the department, and it has declined to comment. Just last December, Google's CEO went before Congress to unequivocally deny that the tech giant tries to influence political behavior.
I lead this company without political bias and work to ensure that our products continue to operate that way. To do otherwise would be against our core principles.
But Voorhees says he knows that's not true.
They're telling people that, oh, they don't have any blacklist. This is all done. You know, they don't have any political ideology. They don't have any political bias. But it's really clear that they do. And, you know, if Google wants to have political bias and they want to say that they've got political bias, you know, that is their right as a company. But for them to go under oath and say that these blacklists don't exist is hypocritical at the least. And it's perjury at the worst.
Robert Epstein, the former editor of Psychology Today, says he's studied Google since 2016 and is worried about what it might do in 2020. In June, he told Congress that Google search results in 2016 were significantly skewed in favor of Hillary Clinton. Epstein says he supports Clinton, but not biased search results. He says his research shows that they can shift the voting preferences of undecided voters by 20% or more. And he's worried about that happening next year, with left-leaning tech giants like Google, Facebook, and Twitter.
In 2020, you can bet that all of these companies are going to go all out, and the methods that they're using are invisible, they're subliminal.
Epstein is calling for Congress to begin large-scale monitoring of search results to prevent an unfairly influenced election. And Voorhees is hoping that the Department of Justice will begin to seriously investigate Google and whether or not it's shutting out certain voices. Heather Sells, CBN News.
It's a shocking thing to think that's going on, that you're being manipulated by these giant corporations. They didn't used to be that much giant, but now they are. And you look at Amazon, you look at Google, you look at Facebook, and these other, they are the ones that have influenced the opinion, especially of the younger generation. And if there's a massive voting for the socialist trends that are being exhibited by the Democrats, it'll be tough for our economy, and it'll be tough for the world if this happens. And it's time for the Justice Department to, we don't want the government putting this heavy hand on the scales. We don't want that. But at the same time, if these people are exercising a monopoly on news and they're excluding the opinions of others and they are dominant, then the antitrust laws should apply. And it's time to get busy with the Justice Department because the elections are going to be coming up very, very shortly. Well, in other news, the threat of a recession has the White House looking for new ways to spark the economy. John Jessup has more on that.
Thanks, Pat. It's not just America that might be facing an economic downturn. New problems in Europe threaten to drag down the global economy. As Dale Hurd reports, while the White House is projecting an optimistic front, it's also beginning to show signs of concern.
With speculation that a recession is on the horizon, the Trump administration maintains the economy is strong, but also seems to acknowledge the possibility of a downturn. A new Politico report says Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney told Trump supporters at a weekend fundraiser that if a recession is coming, it will be moderate and short. In a sign the White House is concerned, officials are reportedly looking at a range of tax cuts, from the corporate tax rate to capital gains to a payroll tax cut.
Payroll tax is something that we think about, and a lot of people would like to see that, and that very much affects the workers of our country.
Although a White House official disavowed the plan. A majority of economists believe a slowdown is coming. They just can't agree on when.
I don't think we're in a recession. I don't think we're close to recession, but I do think the economy is slowing down. And personally, I think the trade policy is damaging both the U.S. directly and a lot of expectations about where the world economy and the U.S. economy are headed.
Even the president seems to acknowledge the possibility of recession, saying if his trade war with China causes a short pain, it's for long-term gain, and that somebody had to have the guts to do it.
Whether it's good for our country or bad for our country short term, long term, it's imperative that somebody does this. I am doing this whether it's good or bad for your statement about, oh, will we fall into a recession for 2 months, okay? The fact is somebody had to take China on. And the smart people say thank you very much. And the dumb people have no idea.
Meanwhile, Europe's problems continue to mount. Italy's government collapsed Tuesday. And some believe there's a chance that a right-wing, Trump-loving, EU-hating populist named Matteo Salvini could be the next prime minister at a time when Italy is economically fragile. Economic powerhouse Germany is facing a recession. And in London, Boris Johnson again pledged that Britain is leaving the EU by the end of October no matter what. And the British press, most of which oppose Brexit, has been cooking up all kinds of economic nightmare scenarios. But it's not at all clear just how chaotic a so-called hard Brexit might be. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. Pat?
Talking yesterday to some of the couple of the economists from Keel Point that manages the endowment at Regent University, and we were discussing the fact that the Federal Reserve Board has built up huge reserves, much bigger than in past times. They have several $1 trillion of reserves. And it's been suggested, and I don't know why we don't do it, there is a pressing need for infrastructure. The bridges are collapsing, the roads are collapsing, the underground infrastructure with water and sewage is collapsing, and it's at least $1 trillion deal. Well, why couldn't the Federal Reserve loan the government some of the money that it's gotten from the government anyhow? It wouldn't affect the market, it wouldn't be inflationary, and it would be a way of taking, say, $1 trillion and spending it on infrastructure, and it would put people to work. It would be one of the most stimulating things you can imagine. And if it were done, it would put America on a firm footing for the future. So, Mr. Trump, that's one more idea. John.
Pat, President Trump is postponing a September trip to Denmark after the Danish Prime Minister said she's not interested in selling Greenland to the United States. The Danish government responding that cancellation comes as a surprise. Greenland is a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark, relying on the European nation for about 2/3 of its budget. The main island sits northeast of Canada between the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans. In recent days, the president has talked about potentially buying Greenland, expressing interest in its natural resources like coal and uranium. But after Denmark's prime minister said Greenland is not for sale, Trump tweeted the planned visit is off. But he thanked her for her candor and said he's looking forward to rescheduling the visit. Well, the Trump administration is moving to limit the number of families entering the United States illegally by ending a policy requiring the release of families detained at the border after 20 days. Under the new policy, families will be held together while a judge considers their case. New detention standards for housing families is also part of the plan. The administration says traffickers are using children to exploit the catch and release program. It also says some kids have showed up multiple times with different families. Well, 50 years after American astronauts landed on the moon, NASA is ready to go back. The space agency says America is one step closer to returning to the lunar surface, but that's just the beginning. As CBN's Abigail Robertson reports, the final destination could be Mars.
Nearly a decade since NASA retired the space shuttle, the vice president emphasized Tuesday that America will be key when rockets and astronauts head into space by the end of this year.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
The successful launch of the Orion test spacecraft this summer is propelling NASA one step closer to a moon landing and possibly beyond.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Now, 50 years after Neil Armstrong first set foot on the moon, the U.S. plans to return.
The next man and the first woman on the moon will be American astronauts.
NASA hopes the 5-year timeline will also put Mars within reach.
Our objective will be to establish a permanent presence on the lunar surface, and from there we will develop the capabilities to journey to the red planet of Mars.
NASA Chief Jim Bridenstine says the moon will be a proving ground and potential launch pad.
It's the best place for us to live and work on another world so that we can ultimately go to Mars.
If all goes as planned, the first human mission to Mars could come as soon as 2033.
People say, why are you accelerating the mission to the moon? Well, because it accelerates our mission to Mars.
Assembling in front of the retired space shuttle responsible for more space flights than any other spacecraft, Vice President Pence said Tuesday that American spaceflight is back.
Working with our industry leaders, before the year is out, the United States will once again send American astronauts into space on American rockets from American soil.
The revitalization of the space program comes as the White House says adversaries like Russia and China are transforming space into a war-fighting domain. To combat that, the vice president said Tuesday the new U.S. Space Command is set to launch under General J. Raymond next week. Reporting from Washington, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Pat, back to the moon within 5 years. That's exciting news.
Well, it's exciting, except look, it's a dead rock. What's the moon? What's Mars? I mean, they're dead rocks. I mean, who needs them? I mean, it's one of those things. I'm not excited about going to Mars. I mean, they've got all these rocks out in space, and good for them, but you can't put people on them, and so if we get to Mars, what have we accomplished?
How long has it been since we've been on the moon? I can't remember. It's been a long time.
It's 50 years since that first, launch,
right,
and so but I think NASA has accomplished a tremendous amount, and but the idea of having a space, the trouble is with the space satellites that are up there, and telecommunications are so vital, we have to be aware that our enemies want to seize the high ground and, beat us in space. They can launch missiles, they can interfere with our communications, the telecommunications that we all use are in space satellites. And so if somebody has access to those and can destroy them, they can really do damage to us. So I think it's the low frontier, not the high frontier, we ought to be sure we gain control of. And I'm all for that, but saying I'm going to go to Mars, I mean, big deal.